My name is Allison, and I'm a storyteller. Well, I'm technically an illustrator, but in my opinion, they're one and the same, since my favorite part of illustrating is the storytelling aspect. When I make an illustration, I usually have a story I'd like to tell first. I ask myself questions like, who are my characters? Where do my characters live? How do they interact with each other? After I've answered these questions, I start to play around in my sketchbook and dream up different ways I can illustrate my story. For my latest illustration, it all started with an odd fascination I have with raccoons. At one point, I had been seeing them all over the city, which inspired me. It inspired me to make an illustration telling the story of a raccoon after a long night's scavenge. After I settle on my story, the fun begins. Drawing. I usually start with a rough sketch in Photoshop. I use a light color to map out the flow of the image. Once I'm happy with my foundation, I go back in and I build on top of my sketch with an ink brush and start to refine shapes. This is one of the most time-consuming steps in my process because I tend to draw with a mixture of confidence and uncertainty, meaning that I'll draw a shape, then erase it, draw another shape, and then erase it again, and so on and so on. In this inking phase, I like to use my line work to create texture, movement, and definition. I try to give my illustration personality. Finally, I incorporate color. For this raccoon illustration, I wanted to emphasize the line work in the drawing, so I went with a pretty minimal color palette. I used the complementary colors yellow and violet to try and give the drawing a soft and luminous quality. At the end of it all, my ambition is to entice my viewer with details, to invite them to peek into my imagination, and maybe even inspire them to tell their own stories.